Hello there. Well, that's a great way to start 2023. More bad news about the total insecurity of UK energy supplies. Now, if you haven't already done so, please do subscribe, click the little bell, select all, and then like and comment below. A happy new year to everyone, and I hope you're now over the excesses of the overnight celebrations. So here we are suffering from hugely overpriced energy, and the government's attempts to address this by taxing energy providers into the ground is about to lead to even more potential for our electricity to be rationed by rolling blackouts. And this time it's the effect that the windfall taxes will have on the French companies that supply the UK with nuclear electrical generation. And it gets worse, all because politicians make big policy decisions today but do not have to wear the long-term consequences of their normally short-term driven decisions. This country cannot trust its politicians to make their decisions on the long-term requirements of the UK and its people. We need to address that shortfall as a matter of urgency, something I'll come on to in a moment. So the UK, the country that pioneered the use of nuclear power for the commercial generation of electricity, is now on the verge of losing 2 of its 5 remaining nuclear power plants because of net zero and the government chasing tax. That could wipe away electricity for 4 million homes, or 4% of our energy generating capacity, says the Telegraph. And because of that, we face having the very small extra generating power we have in the UK wiped out if EDF is forced to close those plants. Yes, any spare capacity would be erased, and any disruption to any electricity generating source after that would force blackouts on us. Now, these 2 plants are old, and EDF had been looking to extend their lives to help with this energy-driven crisis. But windfall taxes would make that unviable, says the company. May all those politicians in the Houses of Commons and Lords face the comeuppance for their short-term, headline-grabbing, legacy-seeking, vote and appointment-chasing political manoeuvrings. Their job is to set in train policies that make the UK stronger, wealthier and a better place to live over the long term. They have failed comprehensively on all those scores for decades. Or is it all some dastardly plot to make us plebs use less and less energy in the coming years to the point we are reliant on government handouts? You decide. And you can't blame Brexit for these decades of failure. It's not even 2 years since we actually left the EU in any shape or manner, and energy security cannot be built in such a short time frame, but it can be easily trashed. No, it's down to those in power across those decades, the Tories, Labour and the Tory Lib Dem coalition, all of them putting energy security at the back of the queue, along with defence and border security and the rest of it, all behind net zero and wokeness. We need to tie the financial futures of today's politicians and those who've retired directly to the economic performance of the country and the prosperity of its citizens. Why oh why do we keep handing out the equivalent of index-linked remuneration to a bunch of people who therefore have no incentive to look at the needs of the country past the date of the next general election? And once they do a couple of terms, they can go on a nice fat index-linked pension. I do have to wonder how much more long-sighted these people would be if their future pay and pension rises were more based on something like rises in UK GDP. But not basic GDP, where they could just open the borders to increase the population, something that would increase GDP by default. No, based on something along the lines of GDP per capita. But GDP per capita after taking inflation into account. So GDP would have to increase for each person in the UK after inflation was accounted for before politicians got a pay rise. But we'd have to ensure those tinkers in Westminster had no way to tinker with whatever measure was put in place. With the aim being no increase in GDP per capita, no politician gets a wage rise, and no former politician gets a pension rise. Further, no rise in GDP per capita, no honours handed out that year to serving or former politicians. And break those conventions that mean all prime ministers and all speakers, for example, are meant to get awards and honours. At the moment, when one of them doesn't get their required reward, it creates a logjam, causing future potential recipients of such awards being forced to wait for theirs. So if politicians' future pay and pension rises were tied directly to rising GDP per capita, they would be working very hard to ensure that happened. And at the moment, GDP per capita has been stagnating since 2007, which was well before Brexit, and the Brexit vote had very little impact on it. In fact, GDP per capita was slightly higher in 2021 than it was during the Brexit vote year of 2016. Also, the wealth of the nation in terms of GDP per capita would become more the focus of political debate, and those tranches of the political class that fail to increase it would be deemed to have failed, and might not get those nice gongs and post-Westminster directorships and the like. Or maybe another way would be to pay a proportion of their pay and pensions in government gilt-edged bonds that they have to keep for at least a year or more before they can sell them. Then the policies emanating from Westminster might not be so short-term, ideologically driven and taxpayer money hungry. To maintain the value of those bonds would require a strong economy, not a junk one. Or we could even have a combination of politicians getting GDP per capita pay rises and being paid partly in government debt. Now, some might feel it unfair for retired politicians to be hit in this way by the policy decisions of current politicians. But the message would be powerful, and past politicians would campaign heavily for those that keep GDP per capita after inflation on the rise. It might also kill off the lobbyists looking to influence politicians for short-term gain. I don't know, just thinking outside the box in the new year. But as we all know, politicians are short-term thinkers, and it would be these politicians that would have to vote on long-term considerations to accept such a pay and pensions policy that might adversely affect their wages in a decade or more's time. So they won't vote for it anyway, and even if they did, the next lot would just reverse it. No, we're stuck with it. We're stuck with the political horizon being no more than 5 years away at any one time. For example, the whole political debate and battleground is focused on only one thing today. The next maybe 2 years to the next general election. The entire political and media focus and thought will be about what they say and do to try and get you to vote for either red or blue at that point. They will promise this and that, but never have to deliver. In fact, the only thing that gets properly and totally delivered at every general election is the apparent transfer of political power and control of the nation's finances from red to blue or vice versa. That's it. Yes, we're stuck with it until we find a way of getting the majority of the electorate to stop viewing UK politics as either red or blue holding the reins, and also tying politicians' rewards directly to the ongoing prosperity of the people of our nation. And finally, when subscribing, please don't forget to press that little bell and also select the all option, or you won't get any notifications when I publish a new video. And thank you all so much for taking the time to watch the show.